My name is Joe. 20 years ago, my wife and I moved to Lake County with our 4 young children and settled down. In that time, we've worked, worshiped, played, and raised our family. Today, I've met the people and discovered the businesses and organizations that make up a vibrant, dynamic community. Join us as we share with you what makes South Lake great. I'm Joe, and Joe knows South Lake. Welcome. Happy South Lake morning. Amazing Wednesday. So excited to be here. We have such an amazing show for you today. I can't see straight. I got a little bit of a problem with Miss Pat, though. I had to pick her up. She went to visit the grandbaby last weekend down in West Palm, and figured out it's cheaper for her to take the train than for me to drive down and pick her up. So she takes the train. I went to pick her up yesterday. I brought her home. We got some dinner, all sorts of leftover dinner food, Chinese food. We had a good time. Figured that's okay. She'll be with me all week to eat up all these leftovers. And she comes out to me and says, "Honey, you know that conference I was going to commute back and forth to?" I'm like, "Yes, dear." "Well, I got a room. So, you need to drop me off tomorrow." Leaving me with now a bunch of Chinese food I think I'm going to freeze to have for meals when she gets back. The rough life of Joe, it's so tough for me today. What it does mean is I have a very busy day. I'm very excited to have today's show today. I think our guest is going to have a great perspective. What do we have today? We're going to talk about Vet Girls Rise. You got to stick around for what this is. It's National Vet Girls Rise Day. It's official. We have a new community calendar. We're going to talk all about the community calendar. On Cup of Joe today, I'm going to continue the It's Good to Be series. So we're going to talk about what it's good to be. And finally, we have Charles Wright. Now, Charles Wright is not a guest like I normally have. Charles Wright is an established member of our community, a gentleman who is retired here, quite active in the community through Christian Men in Action, which is a local faith-based group. I met him because of some events him and his group were doing, and through another fella, Brother Tim Murray. See, I don't mess up a name every day. I get names right all the time. So that's my little positive affirmation thing. So I met him, and he's just going to have a real cool perspective today. And he's going to talk about Black History Month. And actually, he's going to talk about Black history, but we have a kind of an interesting take on it. So we're going to hear from our sponsors. When we get back, we'll get started. See you in a minute. Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors.
My name is Michael Singh, Agency Principal of Singh Insurance and Financial Services. We offer auto insurance, home insurance, and life insurance. Our office number is 352-432-1646, and you can also check us out on our website at www.singhinsurancegroup.com.
They are dependable, honest.
Every time I come over here, I've always feel like they go the extra mile for me.
The quality of not only the product they're providing, but them believing behind it.
I just trust them, they're a great company, great dealership.
Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors. And welcome back. All right, let's get right to it. Today is National Vet Girls Rise Day. Now, you might ask yourself what that means. Vet Girls Rise is an organization for women veterans. He actually brought it up on the National Day calendar. This is the thing that I pull all our national days off of. This is a day to celebrate women veterans. I think this is such a great idea. The truth is, I sell a lot of real estate, and when I sit down and ask people, how they're going to finance a home, I ask both sides of the couple if they're veterans, because in today's world, women take a very active part in the waging of war and the protection of our country. I know that there are an awful, Tulsi Gabbard, perfect example. This woman is a combat pilot from the Iraq-Afghanistan wars, was deployed 3 separate times. As a matter of fact, there's a woman in our office, name is Maria, and I just drew a blank on her last name. Maria is actually one of my mentors, whether she knows it or not. I love her to death. And one of the things that is so cool about Maria is her time in the service. It is not surprising that she is one of our top agents because she brings the dedication that she had to her country, to her service, and to her time in the military service, to her business practice, and to her family. She's very dedicated to the business, very dedicated to the industry. So I want to say for all of you women veterans out there, one vet to another, great job. I'm on your side. I got your back. If you would like to know how to join this group, they have a Facebook page. They have a website. It's vetgirlsrise.com. It's an organization that only started in 2017, and they have meetups, lunches, women supporting women. Please reach out to them. It is really something that could help you. All right. The other big news. Are you ready? Oh, I probably shouldn't do that with the microphone. We can get the drum roll. We can announce now the community calendar. It is official. It's been created. We have a system in place. So I'm going to let Jay explain how this works. This is on our homepage, southlake.tv. Go ahead, Jay.
All right, Joe. So we've been working on this for a little bit here. Can you hear me okay? You can't hear me okay. There we go. You can hear me.
I can hear you fine.
So on our webpage, which is southlake.tv, just go to southlake.tv, like television. So here's Joe in a time warp here. We're going to catch up to ourselves. So this is what's playing right now on our homepage. But if you scroll down just a little bit, here's where you can take a look at if you have a Roku device or you want to get a Roku device and watch us on traditional TV. You can get this little link right here, copy and paste, and put that in your web browser when you sign into your Roku. But if you scroll down, here's our community calendar, and currently proudly being sponsored by Modern Orthodontics, which you can actually click on there and go to their website. But down here is the actual calendar. You can scroll through, you can click on the events. Miss Karen Rose was here to promote her event last week, or was it this week, Joe? I'm forgetting now.
Her event was last week, yep.
So on March 5th, they're going to have the event over at Lake Catherine, so you can actually add to your calendar if you're, and you can actually look at this on your mobile device as well. So you can add it directly to your calendar on your mobile device. Here's all your contact information. We also have Strikeout Leukemia. So all the really cool events that are happening in town, we're starting to put these and populate this inside the calendar. If you have any events or you have something you'd like to promote, please feel free to send us an email at news@southlake.tv. You can click the link or just send it directly to news@southlake.tv. Please feel free to send us as much as you want to promote. We'll put it on the calendar. We'll promote it here on Joe Knows South Lake. And feel free to share our calendar with anyone that you want to on social media so that way you can help promote it as well. And the more information you send to us, the more we can populate inside the calendar for the folks who want to attend your event so they can get registered and they can actually show up and check it out.
Okay, so the best part about this is there is no cost to post something on our community calendar. It is literally a community calendar. So if you have anything, just let us know. You can send it to news@southlake.tv. Is that correct, Jay? You can email it to news@southlake.tv. When he says we'll promote it, literally we'll promote it on the show. It'll be on the calendar. I can also bring you in as a guest. If you want to be a guest, Jay, can you put up my contact information? If you send us an event and you want to promote it on the show yourself, and I'd love you to, I'm always looking for guests, let me know. We'll schedule you as a guest on the show to talk about the event, to see what's going on, learn a little bit more about our community and what you're trying to do. And finally, there's even opportunities for you, if it's event appropriate, there's opportunities for you to have the event live streamed. So let us know. Send us the information. Send me an email at that or call me at that information. I'd love to get you on and talk about the opportunities. All right. Cup of Joe today. It's continuing in our our series of It's Good to Be. Today I want to talk about It's Good to Be an American. Okay, here's my perspective. And consider this is coming from a guy who grew up in a rough part of Boston. Okay, I did not grow up in the lap of luxury. Had a very, shall we say, eclectic, not traditional childhood. I joined the Marine Corps. It was the 80s. I got to see places around the world that I had never imagined. I was in the invasion of Grenada. I saw 3 tours in Beirut, Lebanon, when it was really, really hot. I got out of the service, and while I have had an eclectic life, it has not always been on the top of the heap. Okay? So this perspective comes from somebody who has not always had the best of things. It's amazing to be an American. Do you realize nowhere else in the world do you have the opportunity to change your circumstances? There is no place in the world where you have the freedoms and the protections that you have here. Is somebody going to hand it to you? Probably not. But no place else in the world can you sit down and determine in your heart that if you're willing to make good choices and work hard long enough that you can't get everything you ever dreamed of. Our world today, our country today, is filled with people who have no concept of what it is like to struggle. That in and of itself is an amazing thing. Now, am I saying our country is perfect? No, I'm not. But one of the beauties of being an American is the understanding that we have the capacity to improve. The real genius of our country and our Constitution is not the power or the rights that we have. The genius is in its ability to change with the times, with the people, with the situations. You are an American. You were part of defending one of the most evil empires in the history of mankind. That might be our history. I'm talking about Hitler and Germany in World War II. Since World War II, America has been a major part in holding at bay the evil that would take over the world. The pandemics, health, science, nature, innovation comes from the U.S. And innovation that doesn't come from the U.S. is usually inspired by the ability to tap into U.S. markets. We are the freest, richest nation in the world. Again, I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying we don't have things we need to improve upon. I'm not saying that this isn't a place that can't use a little bit of extra love and prayer. But what I am saying is there's no place else better for you to be. Nothing. That's why the world over, millions of people a year are trying to get into these borders, legally, illegally, and everything in between. They want to be here. That should tell you that it's good to be an American. All right. My guest actually today is, and if you have any questions about that, you have difference of opinion, reach out to me. You'll see the contact information at some point. I would love to engage with you over a cup of coffee. My actual next guest, Charles Wright, is an amazing guy. He has seen the entire civil rights struggle. He is going to talk to us. Black History Month hit, and I realized I hadn't really done anything. And Brother Wright had agreed to come on to the show. I met him once or twice. I've gotten to know him a little bit better. I'm really seeing this gentleman. I think we are going to have a grand and glorious long-term friendship after this. His story is amazing because he was actually part of the civil rights movement, but not necessarily in the way you think. So you really need to stay tuned for this. Look, share this. If you know somebody, if you know anybody who likes history, you know anybody that thinks America is where it should be or that we're broken, either way, tag them in this. Send this to them. This is worth watching. Charles Wright is an amazing guy. So we're going to go to commercial break. When we get back, he's going to be with us. I'll see you in a minute. Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors.
Are you tired of having drugs or alcohol ruin your life? Do you need to get off pain pills but still maintain pain relief? My office in Tavares has programs to help you. While not covered by insurance, program fees are affordable. My name is Alan Zupkin. I'm board certified and have helped thousands of patients achieve these goals. Please call me for further information.
Hello, I'm Mary Rhodes with the Mortgage Firm, your local mortgage lender. I've helped thousands of families achieve the dream of homeownership in Lake County, and I would love to help you. Our team has over 30 years of experience helping first-time homebuyers, veterans, move-up buyers, seasoned investors, and more. Please read our reviews and visit us at mortgagefirmpros.com.
Burgerum, located in the Epic Theater shopping plaza on Highway 27, is the premier destination for gourmet burgers. Using only the freshest ingredients, Burgerum offers a variety of burgers, salads, wings, and a whole lot more. Beef, chicken, lamb, fish, and even veggie. Burgerum has something for everyone, no matter your dietary preference. Burgerum, millions of possibilities, endless combinations.
Okay, so Noah wasn't aware, but we decided that we're going to take Noah's braces off today, just a few weeks early. Noah, we're going to take your braces off.
Is that okay?
You okay with that?
Yeah.
For real?
When I came into the orthodontist today, I had no idea that my braces were going to be taken off.
Alright, you ready to do this? Okay, a little bit tight. I'm going to push on this tooth here, okay? Great job. He was in treatment for about a year just to fix some of the alignment of his upper and lower teeth. And yeah, we just surprised him. Alright, are you ready to take a look? They look really, really good.
I finally get to feel what it feels like without braces anymore. I love my new smile and everything looks great.
Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors. And welcome back. Quick word, I love all our sponsors. We have such an amazing guest today. I don't want to take any time that I don't have to without him. Charles, welcome so much. Thank you so much for coming on out to the show. I am joined by Charles Wright, brother Charles Wright, as he was introduced to me. You know, it was funny. I was driving in. I was going to ask you. I always ask everybody, "What do you want? How do you want to be addressed?" We had Dr. Zupkin on. He told me to call him Alan, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I called him Dr. Zupkin the whole time. And I was just thinking that, you know, as I was driving in, I was thinking, you just don't have that Chuck vibe. I knew Chuck wasn't an option, you know. So this is Brother Charles Wright. Brother Wright has the distinction of being a lot of things, but he was one of the first African-American salaried managers hired by General Motors Corporation. And we're going to talk about that, but I want to talk a little bit about some of what he has done. He was a human resource manager, industrial relations manager, personnel director for the metal fabricating division of General Motors Corporation. He served there for 39.6 years, retiring in April of 2004 when he relocated. In November, he relocated here to Claremont. During his tenure, he had the, shall we say, pleasure, the duty of actually enacting several groundbreaking equal opportunity laws. You were there during the during the Civil Rights Movement, during the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Opportunity Laws of the 60s. You were there during the busing riots in Flint, Michigan, and Pontiac. I'm sorry, Pontiac. I got Flint on the brain. I watch too much news. That's my problem. But Brother Wright is also Secretary of the Christian Men in Action, which is a Christian men's organization, does an awful lot of community service. I've talked about them here on the show before. We interviewed Brother Tim for Martin Luther King Day, and that was part of, they take a heavy role in that. We have their website up, talks about their history. They also, I first got exposed to these guys when I drove by a party that they were throwing at Christmas for some underprivileged children in the community, working with the police, and just had to stop by. You may or may not remember my live cast from there. It was kind of guerrilla style. He is also a member of the New Jacobs Chapel Baptist Missionary Baptist Church. Whew. He is the administrator there and part of the deacons board, as well as a member of several other boards. Charles, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for inviting me.
In our conversation earlier, I was able to, let you know that, I kind of live in this fantasy, that those troubles are somewhat behind us, and that there's not a real problem there. And my daughter-in-love is married to my son, is a great young lady, educated, refined, just an intelligent, sweet, loving girl. She's also her and my son have our first grandbaby, and she was telling me some stories about some of the experiences she's had, because the baby takes after my son, so she leans toward the lighter side, and I kind of it kind of put a question in my mind, because I love my daughter-in-law, but I believed what she said, but I thought maybe she was playing it out, that it was making it bigger than it was. And I spoke to several of my African-American friends and realized that those things are not as overt as they used to be, but they're still there. There still is discrimination. A dear friend of mine,
correct,
unfortunately, he owns a local business and told me, he is also an African-American, told me that, he does show up at jobs and people tell him to take his equipment and his men away because they realize the business is owned by an African, which appalls me.
Right.
Which absolutely, it irritates me and frustrates me. And it frustrates me because it's wrong, and I think it irritates me because I really was under this fantasy that we are better than that. One of the reasons I thought, I believe in the God appointments, one of the reasons I think that you are amazing is some of the story you were telling us earlier, because you're at an age where you've lived through everything. Tell us a little bit of your story, like you were telling me in the other room.
Okay, well, as I indicated, I was born in Southeast Texas, rural Southeast Texas. And when I say rural, I mean rural. Was living with my grandparents at the time, and we had neither running water, lights, or indoor plumbing. Everything was rural. And I can remember my mother taking us to town on Saturday. And I can recall her at the age of 5 or 6 telling me not to drink out of a certain water fountain because it had signs on it that says for white only, as she was pulling me away. I didn't quite understand it at the time, but later on it began to manifest itself as to what was happening. And these are the kind of things that we had to live through back then, but we found a way to overcome them. And as we began to grow and get older, we could see some things begin to change. Some things were not quite as overt as they were previously. And people began to become more sensitized to the plight of minorities and women back in those early days. So we had to do things to overcome and just make our way through them.
Do you know, I wanted to ask, because obviously you had great respect for your father. You know, he worked very hard, moved the family several times to get a better position for you, never quite materialized, I'm sure, the way he dreamed, was willing to do things just to support his family that he would have said no to. And it seems to me, from what little bit I know about your story, though, that your way to overcome wasn't necessarily, you know, protests and getting in people's face, and there were other subtle ways you could do it.
That's correct. As I mentioned earlier, we moved from southeast Texas to the panhandle of Texas, West Texas, Amarillo, Texas, where I went and finished high school. While in high school, I was fortunate enough to excel in sports, football and track, where I earned a scholarship to go to college. Went off to college to University of Mexico for a year, dropped out, and fortunately, God blessed me to get another scholarship to Langston University, where I stayed this time and graduated in 1964. Now, to graduate,
for the people that don't know, where is Langston University?
In Langston, Oklahoma.
Okay.
It's about 30 miles from Oklahoma City.
Which had its own struggles with discrimination.
Its own struggles back then. And in fact, while I was at Langston, Oklahoma was one of the last states to integrate its lunch counters and public places for minorities to attend to. So we, again, late behind times, but getting better as time progressed.
You know, I wanted to ask, you talked earlier about the coach that you had in high school. You know, that you wanted to be a teacher, and you'd hope to be a coach because of what he did in your life. How did it give you hope? I mean, obviously you went on, you believed you could go to college. It was not something that was very common in young African-American men in those days, I'm sure, especially from rural Texas.
He was very influential in my life, and in fact, I went to a segregated high school. Back then in Amarillo, it was separate but equal. Okay,
right.
In a way, that meant that we got books that were used at the white high school as well as, but some of the other things we couldn't mix the sports teams or go to the other high school. And my coach was one who encouraged us to be the best that we could be, to excel as we could be. And he was the coach, and he was a math teacher as well. And I not only was a student and an athlete student for him, my parents moved away from Amarillo my senior year. And my coach didn't want me to move with my family, so I stayed with him my senior year in high school until I graduated. So this was another reason why I loved him as a father and wanted to emulate his life as a coach and a math teacher. So when I graduated from Langston, I had an aunt and uncles that were in the school system in Pontiac, Michigan. They encouraged me to come to Michigan because they felt that I could get a job in the school system there, as they did. Well, once I arrived in Pontiac, Michigan, the job was not available. So I was waiting for an opening to come up. During that period of idleness, let's say, I was sent on an interview to a plant there, which bodied a division of General Motors Corporation. General Motors had many plants, had 5 car divisions, Chevrolet, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and Cadillac, plus the GMC truck and bus group. So I went to the...
was this the 60s now?
This was in the 60s, just 1964. So I went to the interview, and the interview went well. I thought I would hear from them soon, which I did in a day or two, and they called me and offered me the job, and I accepted. And as I accepted the job, I didn't know at the time that I was the first African American to be hired on salary at that General Motors plant. And
which meant you were the first African American to be in a management position.
In a management position at that time, yes. And subsequently, I received some promotions to where I actually became supervisor of the employment office in 2 or 3 years. And following that is when the Civil Rights Act was enacted and passed and signed into law by President Johnson. In 1965, President Johnson signed Executive Order 11246, which meant that any business that does business with the government to the tune of $10,000 or more annually had to have anti-discrimination clauses in there.
Which in the 60s was a lot of government money.
That was a lot of
that was like 500,000 today.
That's correct.
You know, yeah.
That's correct. And so the plants that had government contracts had to comply with the government mandate to have affirmative action programs, because most of the businesses back then were underutilized in their job groups for women and minorities. And we had to establish affirmative action programs as to how the plant and the General Motor Corporation as a whole was going to bring those job groups up to match the population of the demographics in the area where the plant was located. Now, like in Pontiac, the demographics were about 15% minority and 12% women. So that meant that we had to have on salary, in salary positions, 15% minorities or 12% women, or both, to comply with the government mandate.
Do you know, I mean, in our conversation earlier, this fascinates me because you pointed out that when you took over that position, when you, the plant that you were really supervising, what's now called the Human Resources Department, there were no African Americans above a janitorial grade.
That's correct.
There were no women, maybe secretarial, but even then it was very rare. On the production line, in the prime high-paying jobs, there were no minorities and no women. And I think that we sometimes lose that because you were in Michigan.
Right.
And I think there's a tendency to think that when we think of the civil rights movement, when we think of the changes, that was all a Southern thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, the discrimination was only in the South. And as I was sharing with you, I remember as a little kid, the busing riots in Boston.
Right.
You know, and that was Boston, you know, which has always been a highly racially charged city.
It was amazing because, like you said, in 64, early 64, late 60s, early 70s, there were no minorities or women on production jobs or in skilled trades. Minorities were hired in as janitors. Women were hired in as sewers in the cushion room where they made the seat covers for the seats. Those were lower paying jobs. But once the Civil Rights Act was enacted and the affirmative action came into play, we had to be in compliance, and that's when we opened up the production jobs as well as skilled trades.
This is fascinating, and I want to examine this a little bit more when we get back. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and when we get back, we're going to actually talk about non-protest for the civil rights movement. So join us in a second. We'll see you in a minute. Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors.
Your CBD store Claremont provides a wide range of high-quality, full and broad-spectrum CBD products. Topical creams, tinctures, water-solubles, edibles, and even CBD products for your pets. From soil to oil, your CBD store Claremont sources and provides third-party lab tests for all products so that you know exactly what you're getting. Stop by your CBD store Claremont today to speak with one of our knowledgeable staff members to find the right CBD product for you.
Saturday, February 29th at 7 p.m., Groveland, Florida, get ready as local pro wrestling comes to the Purrier Building. 6 matches featuring the British chap, D. Wayne, The Upgrade, Mike Reed, Bruce Worley, Joshua Dawkins, Dion James, and making their LPW debut, the Heartbreak Express. Tickets on sale now on Eventbrite. Like our page on Facebook for more info.
Life is better when you're smiling. At Modern Orthodontics, Dr. Alan Wong has changed thousands of lives helping patients achieve the modern smile with braces and clear aligners. Utilizing digital scanning technology, Modern Orthodontics creates in-office 3D models for clearly modern aligners. Modern Orthodontics is conveniently located in Claremont, Apopka, and Bushnell. Call or text us to schedule your free exam and create your modern smile today.
Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors. And welcome back. We are joined by a fascinating member of our community, Brother Charles Wright, member of Christian Men in Action and I'm not going to mess this up, the New Jacob's Chapel Baptist Church, but also a living piece of history, a man who saw it and lived it and walked out the change in America, the entire civil rights movement. You were just talking about recruiting, and I can imagine, this law comes down, you have nobody in these positions, you've got to find 15% minorities, 15% women to take over these salaried positions, which means now you're looking skilled and educated labor. Mm-hmm. How did you do that? I'm sure that the labor force did not necessarily fulfill that. I know working with businesses today, the question that we deal with is, does the labor force qualify to the... How did you find people to fill those positions?
Well, what the government required was that you had good faith effort. If you, in your demographic area, was unable to fill the positions with women or minorities, we had to document the action that we took to try to obtain the proper applicants for the jobs, which meant that we had to go into high schools, we had to go into various groups within the community, churches, Urban League, the NAACP, and places like this to help us recruit and find qualified applicants for the positions.
Did you have to displace some people? I mean, did GM just expand the plants? Did you have to let some people go? I know that was, at the time, I've done enough reading to know that was a perception, that they were going to let go qualified white people to make positions for minorities and women.
As you indicated, that was a misconception and a misunderstanding of what the Civil Rights Act really stood for. As I just indicated, if the demographic in the area was 15% minorities and 12% women, that's about 27% of jobs, which meant that there were going to be 70-something% of the jobs still available for the white population. The white population constituted 72% of the population. They were still entitled and given 72% of the job. So no one was disadvantaged.
So my question is, though, did you have to make positions?
No.
Or did the positions get created as the business expanded?
Business increased and opportunities availed themselves to where we did need to hire additional people.
Now, did you find that tended to be a magnet because you now were in those policies? Did the community become a magnet for people who qualified for those jobs? Or did you have to sometimes reach out to the community?
It did not. One of the things that we were disillusioned about was that we thought that once we started to advertise these good paying jobs that people would flock to the plants. But in Pontiac, we had about 5 General Motors installations. We had Pontiac Motors, Fisher Body, GMC Truck and Bus, Parts Warehouse. So an employee could get hired at Fisher Body in the morning. If he didn't like that job, he could quit, go next door to the motor plant and get hired in there. If he didn't like that job, he could quit and go get a job at the truck plant. That's just how plentiful jobs were. In fact, we even sent buses on recruiting ventures down into the southern states to bring people up to work in the plants during the model year, like April through September. And then they had the other months off. They could go back and do their foreman and what they did whenever they got back home. But when the plants got through with that model change, they would come back and start the next model year
Wow.
of vehicle.
Wow.
So
you have to enact these laws, and this is what I wanted to get is, you and I talked about your temperament, okay? And they obviously hired you because they felt that there was something in you. You'd referred to earlier that you were not going to act explosively.
Right.
That you could take some things and we tend to think of the civil rights movement and the men and women that fought it as just the men and women who carried a sign or walked in a protest march. But that's not the reality, is it? It was guys like you. I mean, you must have had staff and supervisors fighting that fight. You were just doing it differently.
that's correct. Like you just indicated, the temperament was very important because there were some in the workforce that had that mentality that, what is this African American or black doing in the white collar job? And they would let
I'm sure they didn't use those words. Let's be honest.
They would let their feelings be known.
Yeah.
And you had to take that, and try to win that person over rather than retaliate or respond in kind to what they were saying.
I just love the idea, referring back to what that coach instilled in you. I can see, just from what little I know about you, and I imagine you inspired this in others, that the best way to fight that was success, was to be the best whatever you were employed to be. You weren't the guy taking the extra break. You weren't the guy showing up late or going home early.
Correct.
You had to be the guy that was if somebody was going to say, how am I going to do that job, they're going to turn to you. And that probably did more, I think, to if I could imagine, I know in my own life, that has done more to inspire me to give people a shot, and to change my own preconceived ideas than anything else,
One thing that was evident, one of the jobs that I had before I became supervisor of employment was the employment interviewer. The employment interview was the intake of applications. Anybody that got hired had to come through that employment interview.
I imagine you must have seen some interesting looks on people's faces when they opened that door and saw you sitting there.
Anybody that got hired in the plant had to come through that interview.
In 1965.
So that's when the guys in the plant began to know that, hey, if you want to get a relative hired, you got to go up and see Charles Wright, So they would come up and say, so would you consider my brother, cousin, or whoever for a job, and that way, once that kind of got out into the workforce, people in all departments began to accept me because I would go out in the plant and interface with various people, and it was just one of those things where, like I say, rather than retaliate and respond in a negative fashion, win them over.
As the first African American in that position, I'm sure you had a lot of resistance in the beginning. Do you have a specific idea? Do you remember feeling like it had changed? I mean, can you point to a place where you said, "Wow, this is going to work"? You must have had questions in the beginning. Come home to your spouse and say, I don't know what I'm going to do. Did your faith help? I mean, how did you get through those moments?
It did. When I first hired in, there was an elderly gentleman that worked in the employment office. He had been there 30-something years at that point.
He was who you became.
He didn't associate with anybody in the office. He was a loner, and he was single. And he would come, he would bring his lunch, and he would eat by himself. And he had a pretty strategic job in the employment. He had to take care of all the seniority and things like this, people that went on sick leave and returned and so forth. And so I made up in my mind, that's the guy I've got to win over. Everybody was a little afraid of him because he had seniority. And in due time, I began to get him to warm up. And after about 2 or 3 months, he was bringing me a sandwich in his lunch bag for us to have lunch together.
And I'm sure you got a great friend and mentor, right?
And he taught me everything that he knew. And then when he was absent or on vacation, I was the only one that could do his job.
Wow. Wow. Do you know, I want to fast forward a little bit here. We are going to run out of time at some point. I think we got like 5 minutes left. What do you see? I mean, obviously you lived through this, and we've talked about the 60s and the 70s and, you know, your upbringing. Today, what do you see the state of that today? I mean, do you see it as a major problem? Do you see it as undercover? Do you see it as guys like me who just aren't aware? I mean, really, I can remember the shock when my friends really confirmed what my daughter-in-law had to say and realizing that I was just in fantasy, you know. I mean, how do you see it today? What's your perspective?
I think a lot has manifested itself in the last 3 or 4 years based on the divisionness that we see in the country right now.
Politically?
Politically. And the thing that's going, I think, is going to have to occur is there's going to have to be more sensitivity, more training, and more education about what is going on in America. What is the American we want, and how do we want it to look? Okay, we're not going back to the 1940s and 1950s.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
That's a pretty certainty. So I believe that people like yourself who are conversant with the causes, you know, back during the civil rights movement, if we hadn't had the Viola Luizos and people like that, the Civil Rights Act never would have happened. So we've got to have people that will come on board and just let people know that all men are created equal, and just give us a chance and an opportunity. That affirmative action, you're never going to be deprived because you're only going to represent a certain portion of the population to start with. You're never going to be 100%. So you can't get all of the job or the attention.
You know, I'm so glad you said that, because my perspective in life and in business has always been, and I talked about a little earlier about being an American. Here in America, it's not a zero-sum game. Because I get something doesn't mean you've done without. Mm-hmm. You know, by extension, if you get something, it doesn't mean I'm doing without.
That's correct.
You know,
mm-hmm.
And frankly, together, you know, we can be a perfect example. I see this all the time, that the sum of the parts or the sum of the whole, two people working together, is greater than the sum of the parts individually.
That's
correct. You know, we can both inform the richness of our experience and change it for the better. I like to think, because I have a granddaughter who's, you know, I can remember part of my conversation with my daughter-in-law is, why does she have to be African American or white?
Right.
Why can't she be more than both? You know, it's that for me, you know, and maybe I'm a dreamer, right?
Well, let me hasten to say this now. Like I was telling you earlier, I've lived under, this is my 14th president, and I've seen things, you know, and they have gotten better. Mm-hmm. Things are better than they were in the 40s, 50s, 60s, even 70s and 80s. General Motors got much better. Chrysler, Ford, the businesses got better because of the Civil Rights Act and affirmative action. And General Motors provided me with a very good lifestyle, enabled me to be able to retire and not have to work in retirement, to live the kind of lifestyle that I like to live. So things did get better.
That's got to be a perspective.
It is.
You enjoy a lifestyle your father never could.
That's correct. In fact, I didn't tell you this, but when I was hired in at General Motors Fisher Body after I was there, and I got a little clout, a little promotions and so forth. I moved my father and my mother and my two brothers and sisters to Pontiac from Texas. Got him a job in the plant.
Wow.
On the production line, on the second shift, making second shift premium, making more money in 1 year than he had made almost in his lifetime up to that point. So he was able to buy a new home, buy a new car, and support my mother and my brothers and sisters before she died. So there were some good things that happened there, and he lived to retire from General Motors. and lived on his retirement and Social Security. So.
It's absolutely amazing. The last question I'd like to ask, and I think are we down to 2 minutes? Am I pushing it? The last question I'd like to ask is, where do you think it's going? I mean, what can we do? I asked you to think about this earlier. What do you think we can do as individuals to make it better, to improve it?
I think we're going to have to exercise our right at the ballot box. We have people in positions of authority and power that are obstacles to progress. They don't want to see progress being made. They're still in a time warp of how things used to be in some instances, and we have gone past that. So I believe we're going to have to use that power of the ballot and get some people out of positions and let some new blood come in with more forward and objective thinking.
Do you know, I am so glad we can end on that note, because I have interviewed, I am friends with and have interviewed a couple of people here, even locally. This is true. There seems to be a freeze out in some cases of minorities in some of the local municipalities, and maybe not necessarily by design, but certainly in effect. And so I think that you're absolutely right that we need to have our voice as Americans be heard.
Correct.
And if we're not, I've said this for years, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. I don't want to hear any complaining, because you could vote. If you're 18 years old and you are not heck, if you're over 18 and a convicted felon, you can have your right to vote restored before you get your right to own a gun restored.
Correct.
Getting your right to vote back is easy, just to ask. So I think that's a great note to end on. That we should all be exercising our voice. Charles, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I knew this would be a great interview. Hate to say I knew it, but hey, Joe knows. I knew this one.
Joe knows South Lake.
Joe knows South Lake. And now Joe knows a piece of African American history. My guest, Charles Wright. I just want to present. I was honored to do this. Really, I know. I have to say, on a personal note, I cherish opportunities to interview men and women at your age and your experience. Not that you're old, but you're in my father's age. And my father has dementia. We were estranged for a great many years, so I don't get to have these conversations with him. And unfortunately, because we were estranged for many years, I never got that perspective before he had dementia. So I really, really appreciate you coming and sharing your life. It can't be easy. Some very personal things. I'm always amazed when a guest will. So you've been an amazing guest. Look, if you know anybody that should be a guest on Joe Knows South Lake, you know how to reach me. I just saw Jay hit the button. I know my information is up there. Reach out to me, please. And if you're not advertising your business and branding your business on South Lake TV, you are missing the boat. We are going directly into the homes, onto the devices, and bringing the news and people of our community directly to your customers. You want them to buy from you? They got to think of you first when the subject comes up. Modern Orthodontics is our sponsor this month for our new community calendar. If you'd be interested in having a direct link to your website through our community calendar, reach out to me. We'd love to have a conversation and get you involved. With that said, it's been great today. I really appreciate it. As Brother Charles or Brother Wright has been doing, using his greatness to bring out the greatness in others. Obviously, for decades, you have greatness in you. And you can use the greatness in you to bring out the greatness in others. Please, today, go out there. Do something to touch another life. That coach that touched Brother Wright's life changed a world of people, helped change the plant, an entire organization and their mentality. And he didn't have to do it and carry a sign. He just did it with his life. Use your life to touch another life today and change the world. This has been Joe Carlisle and Brother Charles Wright with Joe Knows South Lake. I will see you tomorrow, and I really do love you. Bye-bye. My name is Joe. 20 years ago, my wife and I moved to Lake County with our 4 young children and settled down. In that time, we've worked, worshiped, played, and raised our family. Today, I've met the people and discovered the businesses and organizations that make up a vibrant, dynamic community. Join us as we share with you what makes South Lake great. I'm Joe, and Joe knows South Lake. Joe Knows South Lake would like to thank the following sponsors: